Hi everyone, Carter Krishnar here for the Florida Squeeze. This has been a very bad week and a sickening week from my perspective as someone who is who on foreign policy questions has always been more of an interventionist and someone who supports the Western Alliance and supports the idea that the West has a unique mission and a unique role to play in the world in terms of defense, in terms of culture, and all of that. And sometimes this has put me at odds with my own Democratic Party. Not on Iraq. I opposed the Iraq War, actually, and I was beforehand, but I had strategic reasons in the Middle East why I opposed it, which I think ended up proving to be accurate. But I'm someone who has a lot of time for the idea of NATO and the idea that the West, with our liberal democratic values, has a unique mission and has a unique role in the world. So Donald Trump effectively realigning American foreign policy away from Europe and Canada, right? Because this started with hostility to Canada, our closest ally, our best friend, and pointing it towards Russia, obviously is of great consternation to me. And if you want to talk about the strategic implications of this, I'm available offline to do that. And I blame some of it on Joe Biden because I think Biden did not do enough for Ukraine. We didn't get F-16s to Ukraine quickly enough. I am actually a believer that we probably should have put nuclear weapons on the ground in Poland with American advisors supervising. That's a deterrent. Okay, that's for deterrent purposes. That's not to go and start using tactical nukes and start a nuclear war. There's a value to this stuff. I'm a believer that we needed to be more aggressive in sending offensive weapons to Ukraine. But all of that is not what I want to talk about today. And if you want to talk about that more with me, we can talk about it offline. Find me on Blue Sky at kkfla737.bsky, or you can find me on Twitter still at kkfla737. Don't really post there very much. You can find me on the Florida Squeeze website. What I want to talk about is Florida Republicans specifically and their softness towards Russia and why they are so soft towards Russia. Why, when Russia had the full-on invasion of Ukraine in 2022, I'm not even talking about 2014, when they did first encroach Ukrainian territory, held a sham plebiscite in Crimea, occupied Donbass. And at that point, I was fighting with Republicans and Democrats about the importance of it. Although Democrats gradually came around to the view that this wasn't a good thing. By 2016, they were all on board on the idea that Ukraine's territorial integrity should be protected and maintained. Although, as I said, I don't think Biden, in his first 2 years in office prior to the full-on invasion in February 2022, did nearly enough. 2021 should have been spent buffering up Ukraine and the nuclear peace with Poland, as I mentioned, a NATO ally, a NATO treaty ally. But I wanted to talk specifically about Florida Republicans because I noticed this starting in 2014. After the invasion, I was actually in Tallahassee during that period and I thought, and I had this reputation among people in Tallahassee, even among a lot of Democrats, as being a leftist, being a progressive and this and that. So I think a lot of people were shocked by my hawkish demeanor. And my desire to sanction Russians, my desire for the state government to take a role, knowing the number of suspecting, I should say, at that time. Now we know. Suspecting the number of Russian assets that were running around in Florida and suspecting the amount of Russian money tied to Russian oligarchs that was piling into campaigns in the state of Florida. Why are Republicans so soft on Russia? Why did DeSantis and Petronas not want to divest Russian assets, Russian investments from the Florida retirement system, yet they'll go after any company, any American company that employs people in Florida that they consider woke? Think about that for a minute. And then also think about the fact that you have Russian assets running around the state. You had Roger Stone, Paul Manafort. They were both living in Florida. You had people who worked with them I don't want to get specifically into names, but people who've been named in DOJ indictments, who've been named in reporting. You have a huge Russian expat community in Sunny Isles, Hallandale, Hollywood, and Southern Florida, who are tied to various moneyed interests back in Russia. And then you have Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio sitting across the table from Sergei Lavrov and his team this past week in Riyadh. And you put two and two together, you put this all together, and you understand the amount of Russian money that flows into campaigns in Florida. I had seen a while back that Marco Rubio had basically more money from Russian adjacent sources in his campaign in 2016. I don't know about 22, but in 16 than any other U.S. senator. And this is because of the Russian influence in Florida. It may be partly subconscious, but when it came to coming after Russia, as DeSantis and Petronas could do, they wouldn't touch it. They wouldn't do it. And in the case of Rubio, he quietly flipped from being someone who was critical of Russia to being someone who did not vote in the Senate the right way on Ukraine. In fact, he did not vote, and nor did Rick Scott. And this has to do with this money as well. And it wasn't a partisan vote. Mitch McConnell voted on the same side as the Democrats. John Cornyn voted on the same side as the Democrats. John Thune, now the leader, voted on the same side as the Democrats. So there is, and I'm not going to get into specifics today. I'll probably get into specifics in the future because this is a issue that has to be relitigated. There is a lot of Russian money and Russian adjacent money floating around in Florida politics, mostly going to Republicans. We are where we are. We're American foreign policy because of the Florida influence in the MAGA movement. In addition to Elon Musk, I'm not one of these Democrats, liberal Democrats, who says, "Oh, Trump was in the pocket of Putin the whole time." Right? I'm not into all that. Although at this point, those people look very credible because it looks like that. But I think the combination of the Florida elements of the MAGA movement, as well as Elon Musk, who is absolutely 100%. In my mind, after the mineral wealth of Eastern Ukraine, who is doing a deal with Putin, who wants to do a deal with Xi to sell cars in China and his other industries, who has effectively ad-libbed as the American president in his meetings with Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India, because again, India, a huge consumer market. Its consumer market is only rivaled by the United States. And Musk wants to be in there. So a combination of Musk and Florida Republicans are conducting American foreign policy now and realigning it toward Russia. And I think probably, despite their rhetoric, eventually toward China. I wrote a piece several years ago on the Florida squeeze about 11 reasons Trump, in his first term in 2020, I wrote it in 2020, from 2017 to 2020, had actually coddled China. 11 specific examples of it. In spite of his belligerent rhetoric towards China, he's been effectively a great ally in transferring American ingenuity, the American mentality of being a superpower and aiding and abating China's rise. So thank you for watching, and I'll be back with you real soon, hopefully. I hope everyone's doing well.